Okay, step one is we hydrate our yeast. We do this by adding 2 cups of lukewarm water to a small bowl. Then we add 2 tablespoonfuls of sugar. Kind of mix that in. Then we add 24 grams or 3 of these 8-gram packets of yeast. And it's very important that the water temperature is neither too hot or too cold, just lukewarm. Good, then we set that aside to hydrate, maybe 10-15 minutes. The yeast will start to bubble and it will likely double in size. Okay, while our yeast is hydrating, we can start mixing together all of our components, starting with 7-pound bag of flour, leaving back maybe about 2 cups, which we may need later on. You'll see later on in the video that we need to keep a little bit of flour behind for later. Okay, to our 7 pounds of flour, we add 1/2 cup of sugar and 1/4 cup of salt. Now, using both hands, mix these two together, and you'll feel as you keep doing this that it will take a sort of a sandy texture. Just keep working it with both hands like that. Keep folding it over, tumbling it around. And you want to keep doing this for a couple of minutes for sure. So you continue mixing until it feels like it's been thoroughly mixed. Okay, once all your dry components have been thoroughly mixed, you can now add 1/2 cup of softened margarine. And this is where we really start getting our hands into this. Alright, so using both hands again, now you grab and squeeze and work the margarine into the flour mixture. Grabbing and squeezing. And you can sweep the outer rim of your container to make sure that you thoroughly and evenly mix the flour into the margarine. And as you do this, you'll start to feel that the margarine is actually forming little lumps in the flour. That ought to do it. Now remember earlier that we put our yeast aside to hydrate? Look at that, it's kind of big and fluffy. So give that a gentle stir, not too much. And here's where we really get in the mess. So you add your yeast, and using one hand, you squeeze the yeast mixture into the flour. You just keep squeezing and squeezing. And as you see, this is very, very dry now. It's very dry, very clumpy. What we're going to need to do is to add more lukewarm water as needed until we get a good consistency. Again, keep working with one hand, squeezing. Keep turning, moving the dry stuff into the wet stuff. That's starting to feel right there now. Don't worry if you add too much water. If you do, you can simply just shake a little bit of flour into it. It tends to dry it up a little bit. May need a little more water. Just a little. Okay, now that we've got it well mixed, actually that's maybe a little bit too wet. We can just add a little dusting of flour over it. Should take care of it. And we'll work that in. Maybe a little more. Now we can begin the first kneading. So basically what we're doing here is going to be a folding and punching technique. Where we fold the bread. And again, if you find it a little bit sticky, you can sprinkle a light dusting of flour. And you just continue to fold and punch this down with your fist until you see that everything is kind of well blended together. And then you can flip the whole thing over, tuck it in on the bottom to form a nice bun. Then you just take a little smear of margarine and you kind of just grease up the top of your bun, so as it rises it won't stick to the pan. And that's it, you're done. So you just got to set this aside. It'll rise. It'll probably rise higher than the top of the pan. Then it's ready for its second kneading. Okay, and throughout this whole process, it's really important to note that temperature is everything. You've got to have the kitchen nice and warm. You have to keep the bun nice and warm in order to encourage it to rise. So what I like to do, once I've got my bun made, I like to cover it with a lid and wrap it up nice and cozy in a towel, just to help keep the heat in and keep everything nice and warm. So we'll just let that sit aside and we'll check back on it in a little while. Okay, our bread's been rising now for about 3 hours. So let's see what we've got. Okay, as you can see, it's risen just above the top of the pan. It's been about 3 hours, and this will vary depending on room temperature and on the viability of the yeast that you're using. So at this point, what we need to do now is knead the bread down. We're not going to work it too hard. What we're going to do is just use the back of my hand just to release the air bubbles. We're just going to flatten this down gently. And you'll hear the bubbles popping as you press down. We don't want to work this too much at this stage. This is not a true kneading like we did earlier. This is just, again, to let most of the air out. So once we've done that, we flip it over. And again, we tuck it in around the edges at the bottom to form a nice round bun. Looks good. So again, we have a bun in the bottom of the pan, and we'll let that sit again, and it has to go through another rising. This time we're going to let it flow up much higher than it did the last time. Okay, now that our dough is completely risen, the next step is to grease the pan. This is done simply by taking some softened butter on a paper towel or a piece of wax paper, whatever you prefer, and just lightly coat each pan with soft margarine. Now what I've done here was I placed all the pans in the oven for a few minutes just to warm them up a little bit, and it makes it a lot easier to spread the margarine. Well, as you can see now, our dough has risen again really nicely. In fact, to the point where it's actually lifted the top of the pan. So we'll just set that aside. We'll take some flour and place a little flour here on the lid of the pan. We'll show you what that's for now in a minute. Okay, so using a knife, you grab a handful of dough, slice it off, maybe about, maybe this much, and you just start rolling it in your hand. Just takes a little bit of practice to get, but over time you'll get it. And you kind of pinch and gather. I'm just going to do this slowly so you can see. You pinch and gather the dough at the bottom, and just give it a light dusting of flour. Just tap it in the flour and dust it off. And there you go, one nice round bun. Okay, so we're nearly finished making all our buns. And remember, it takes a little bit of time, a little bit of patience to get this right. You keep practicing, you will get it. And when we put these in the pan, these have to rise in the pan before they can go in the oven. So that will mean in total your dough will be after rising 3 times. Twice in the mixing pan and once in the bread pans just before they go in the oven. Okay, now that all the buns have been made and placed in the pans, we'll just lay them in a warm location, usually around the oven if you're preheating your oven. And we'll cover them up with some clean tea towels just to make things nice and clean, nice and toasty warm. And in a little while, these will have risen in the pans and they'll be ready for the oven. Okay, it looks like our buns have been rising in the pan for some time. Now rising nicely up over the top of the pan. So we're going to start putting them in the oven now. We have 6 loaves in total. We're going to do 3 at a time, starting with the ones that appear to have risen the most. So we're going to place them in the oven on about 325 degrees for about an hour, and we'll rotate them about halfway through. The time and temperature will vary depending on the power level of your oven. In this case, we're going to go 325 for about an hour. Okay, about a half an hour has passed since we put them in. So what we'll do now is just take them, rotate them on their axes, place them back in the oven. Okay, so it's been about an hour. Let's have a look. All right, nice and golden brown. A couple ways you can check it is look at the bottom. You look at that nice color. You don't want it to burn. Also, it'll feel really, really light. That tells us that it's done. All right, so the last step is to just grease the tops of the buns up a little bit. So a little bit of soft margarine. You can use a paper towel, wax paper, whatever you got. And just give them a good coating of margarine just to finish things off. So I hope this helps. Thanks for watching.